What's going on, everybody? We are continuing our countdown of ranking every episode of The Office. This episode, I covered number 55 through 46. We're getting in the top 50. Oh boy. Let's get into it. Number 55, season 7, episode 15, The Search. After completing a sales call together, Jim rushes home when his daughter gets sick, leaving Michael stranded at the gas station. Holly, Dwight, and Aaron go to pick him up, but Michael has already left and wandering around Scranton, so they search all over town for him. People put captions on one of Pam's drawings, so she draws another one for a caption contest, and Gabe ruins the fun. So and the cold open was really weird and dumb. Ryan and Kelly announced that they got divorced, and everybody's like, what? Apparently, just as I don't know, as a Ryan and Kelly thing to do, they got married like a week before this, and but they decided to get divorced. And then Ryan says, and this is, I think this was around like 2008, 2009, when the whole gay marriage thing was a raging debate. And Ryan said, I refuse to get married unless everybody can get married. And Oscar says, you know what? I talked to all the gay guys and they said they were okay with you getting married. And Ryan was just trying to get out of it. It was just so silly and dumb. But basically the whole point of the episode was Michael and Holly getting back together. And this is one of my favorite moments. I cry every time at the end of this episode because I love Michael and Holly so much. At the beginning of this episode, they argue because I think right before this, Holly just broke up with AJ. And Michael said, okay, so we could get back together. And Holly said, I don't think it's a good idea for me to be dating anybody from work or whatever. So they're arguing at the beginning of the episode. Then Michael goes on a call with Jim, and Pam's mother calls Jim and says, the baby's sick, and also I locked it in the car. So Jim is freaking out. Michael went to the bathroom, and he was stuck he was in the bathroom, so Jim had to leave, and he told the gas station person, hey, when the guy comes out, just tell him I left in the tell him what happened. And the gas station person just said, whatever, I don't care. Why didn't Jim tell the documentary crew? The documentary crew is supposed to be, a silent, character in this show. But come on, let's use some common sense here. Like like Michael gets lost, and how about just having documentary crews communicate with each other? What if Michael was in danger or something like that? So it's really silly. Anyway, so Michael gets lost, and Holly, Dwight, and Aaron go to look for him. And this is basically showing that Holly and Michael are the same person. Everything Holly wanted to do is what Michael already did. And eventually Dwight and Aaron pick up that, oh, they're basically the same person, so they just follow her around. Michael doesn't have a wallet or a phone, so he can't call or buy anything, but he tries to buy a hot dog, and he tries to trade in his watch. That doesn't work. He goes to eat at a Chinese restaurant, and basically doesn't do a dine and dash, but he says, like, I can't pay. So they put his face on the wall of shame, or wall of I forget what they call it, but also Creed is on this wall. Creed was on the wall a couple times. Creed is himself, and then Creed under a wig. So but basically Holly eventually finds Michael because he goes to the top of the building. He goes to the top of the tallest building so he could see where Dunder Mifflin is. And I'm getting emotional just thinking about it. Michael just says, I missed you so much, and I miss you too. And he asks if they could kiss, and they kiss. So it's one of my favorite moments in the entire series, because I just love Michael and Holly so much, even though I meant Michael leaving the show. But yeah, the documentary crew should have just talked to each other. I mean, it was just so silly. So the thing with Pam wrote, so Pam drew some drawing, and Jim really liked it, so he put it in the kitchen, and people drew captions underneath, and you know, and Pam actually liked the captions. She wasn't offended that they messed up her drawing, and she said, "Oh, well, let me." And they were all like things making fun of Saber, so Gabe didn't like it, and Gabe didn't like it. So Pam made a drawing of two dogs on an island talking to each other. So it said, "Caption this," and Gabe said, "Okay, the rules are you can't make fun of the company you work for. Duh. You can't." He put all these restrictions on it that made it like, oh, no pop culture references because not everybody might get them. Okay, really dumb. And you have to use what were those stupid things? There were those sticky notes that Saber just came out with, and nobody did that. And but what everybody did was just basically have a group chat on instant message about it, and uh and just to keep away from Gabe. But eventually Gabe found out because shocker, Phyllis really sucks at computers and she couldn't click on the X. Um so he prints them out, and the winning caption was actually from Angela. The caption was, "Is that a palm tree or did Gabe get skinnier? Either way, let's pee on it." Pretty funny. So yeah, that was basically the whole episode. Number 54, season 6, episode 7, The Lover. Jim and Pam return from their honeymoon to learn to their horror that Michael is dating Pam's mom. Meanwhile, Dwight gives Jim a gift, which is actually has a listening device attached to it. And the cold open was not that great. Jim and Pam are back from the honeymoon, and Michael's character, Blind Guy McSqueezy, is greeting them. Okay, whatever. It was pretty stupid. Yeah, basically the entire episode was Pam being mad at Michael when she finds out that that he's dating her mom. And I love this line. I love this scene where Pam says, "Let me make this very easy for you. I couldn't give a shit about your happiness. Stop dating my mother." And Michael says, "You know what? I'm going to date her even harder." And Pam says, "What is that supposed to mean?" You know what it means. Yeah, that was basically the whole episode, just Pam being mad at Michael. Okay. Yeah, Dwight so Jim is the co-manager at this point, and Dwight is really angry about it. So he gives him a duck or a mallard, and he puts like this really really big walkie-talkie on the bottom of it. And eventually Jim finds out that it's a listening device. But what Dwight actually did was that wasn't a real listening device. The real listening device was in a pen. So now he has hours and hours of Jim talking about paper for so great. Number 53, season 4, episode 11, Night Out. Michael and Dwight go on a New York party. Michael and Dwight go to New York to party with Ryan, who's having lots of personal and professional problems, and the rest of the office employees work late and wind up getting locked in the business park. The cold open, what is a whole string of bad cold opens. Michael had gum in his hair because he saw something shiny at the bottom of Stanley's car, so he went down and he ended up with gum in his hair, and Dwight put peanut butter in his hair. That's it. That was the open, and they told him not to use a good peanut butter. Who cares? So this also furthered the storyline that Ryan has it in for Jim, because Jim says, I don't know if using the website is such a good idea, because we're a personal paper company, and our personal touch is supposed to be what sets us apart. And Ryan says, "Yeah, I know you said that. You also told that to David Wallace," which, okay, I kind of see Ryan's point there. Somebody goes over your head, that's not cool. So Jim should have told Ryan first, but still, I think Ryan was going to hate Jim no matter what. So that just furthers that storyline. In this episode, we have the famous one of the famous memes where Ryan says, "Do you have a question, Kelly?" Kelly says, "Yeah, I have a lot of questions. Number one, how dare you?" I've seen that a million times. Um, so Ryan makes everyone stay to record all of their sales in the website. And so doesn't that mean you double the sales? I mean, this is what ends up getting him arrested for fraud. He's basically announcing the sale, setting up the sales twice. That's not legal. um the So they all stay late, and well, Jim convinces everybody, hey, if we just stay a couple extra hours on Friday, we don't have to come in at all on Saturday. So what Jim doesn't do is tell the security guard to not lock up, or he doesn't tell them what they're doing. So the security guard locks up, which what is Hank doing? Hank locked up the parking lot full of cars, or at least has a bunch of cars in it. Didn't he at any point say, hey, why are you guys all here? But also we learn that they never got him a Christmas gift, and that was Jim's responsibility. So maybe he just said, "I'll screw them. They could deal with their own problem. They could deal with their own issue." So they're all trapped there for hours. They're trying to get a hold of Hank. Eventually, they get a hold of the cleaning crew who lets them out, and then Hank has to come anyway. And when Hank comes, everybody's already gone. He's like, "Damn." But during this, they're all sitting in like the lobby or something like that, and they're all just having a good time. And Toby is right next to Pam, and he just puts his hand on her knee, like in a very sexual way. And then everybody like stops and looks at him doing that, and he's like, I'd like to announce I'm moving to Costa Rica. Okay, bye. And I'll just like jump the fence. And he just jumps over the fence and runs away. That was a really good scene. So Michael and Dwight go to New York to party with Ryan, and Ryan is just at this point, he is just in a free fall. He is just living that executive life, and doing everything, sex, drugs, rock and roll basically is what he's doing. They're trying to get into a club, and they're waiting in line, and they say you can't get in without women. So there's a women's basketball team right in front of them, because Dwight says, "Why are you so tall? What are you, Amazonians or something?" And she says, "No, we're a basketball team." And so Dwight grabs Dwight takes all his guys and pairs them up with women, and they get into the club. And one of the women really likes Dwight. Dwight is like a chick magnet. Did you ever notice that? Um, So Michael is trying really badly to hook up, and he's talking to this one lady, and she says, "What do you do?" And he says, "I'm a bank teller." And then he says in a talking head, he says, "Ryan told me when any girl asks you what you do, tell them you're in finance." And so Michael takes that to mean that he's a bank teller. So Ryan gets into a fight. They all leave the club. Basically, Ryan is just in bad shape, and he so they take Michael and Dwight to his apartment, and they just fall asleep there. And Ryan says, "I think my friend Troy has a drug problem." And Michael says, well, he should do something about that, or he should get support or something like that. I don't think they realized that he was actually Ryan was talking about himself. So Ryan is in bad shape right now. Number 52, season 3, episode 20, product recall. Michael tries to be proactive during a watermark crisis, but only makes the situation worse. Meanwhile, Angela has trouble being apologetic with customers, and Andy discovers a secret about his new girlfriend. This episode should have been rated higher. There were so many good things on this. The cold open was one of the best of the entire series. Is Jim trying to pretend Jim impersonating Dwight, and he did such a good job. Which bear is best? Beats Battlestar Galactica. And Dwight says, "You know what? Identity theft. You know what? Um, imitation is the most sincere form of flattery. So I thank you." And then he he brings out a bobblehead, and Dwight loses it. It said, "Identity theft is not a joke, Jim. Millions of families suffer every year." And then Jim says, "Michael." Dwight says the same thing, "Michael." But I love at the end of the episode, Dwight turns the tables on Jim and pretends to be Jim. He does such a good job. There's a stupid looks to the camera. um and Karen says, "Oh, hi Dwight. Um you look good." And Dwight says, "Yeah, that's because I'm your boyfriend, Jim Halpert. Hey Karen, want to get together and later have sexual intercourse because I'm your boyfriend, because you're my girlfriend?" And Jim says, "Do you want to?" She's like, "No, I'm good, thanks." It's just so silly. Um, so this episode was about a disgruntled employee put uh, a watermark of a duck and a mouse having sex. I think it was supposed to be Donald Duck and Mickey Mouse, but they're not. Obviously, Disney would have sued them into oblivion. So it was just a fake, a generic duck and a generic mouse having sex. And this went out to many customers. So they're freaking out. Michael has a press conference and he says this puts us at threat level midnight. And Jim looks at the camera because there was that. I think it was in season 2. They found the threat level midnight script. He tells Jim, because one of Jim's customers was a high school. He said this went out to the high school. It's went on their prom invitations or something like that. And he says you need you and another person. You and Andy need to go to the high school. And Jim says, "No, I could just do this alone." And Michael says, "No, I need 2 men on this." That's what she said. Kelly, who is the customer service person, because there's so many complaints, everybody in the company has to handle customer service calls right now. So she's in charge of training the accounting people to do customer service. And that includes Angela, who is just mean on the phone. And anytime Angela would take a customer service call, she just made it worse by just being mean to the person. The kind of the star of this episode was Creed, because Creed is in charge of quality assurance. And so he was supposed to catch something like this. And Creed says, "Every week I'm supposed to take 4 hours to do a quality spot check at the paper mill. And of course, the 1 year I blow it off, this happens." But then he gets diabolical because he says, this job is the only thing between me and homelessness. So he finds out that Debbie Brown was missing one day last week, and he basically frames it on her. And he told Dwight that she had a quote emergency dentist appointment. Emergency dentist appointment. That's what Dwight said earlier in season 3 when he tried to take over for Michael. So Dwight was smirking when he heard that. But yeah, so then he gets her fired. Then he collects money for her and then keeps the money. Creed was diabolical. So Michael is going to Michael was going to have a press conference because he's thinking that this is going to be like a worldwide event, like this is going to be major news on CNN and stuff like that. So he invited all of the press, which turned out to be just one guy from the local paper. But he tells Dwight to get the office ready for visitors. Oh yeah, during this press conference, he brought in a customer and he was going to apologize to them, and the customer was supposed to say, "You're forgiven," and everything was going to be good. And it's a good public relations thing. So what Dwight does is it puts all the attractive people at the front. And he says the first rule in roadside beat sales: put the most attractive beats on top, the ones that make you pull the car and go, "Wow, I need this beat right now." Those are the money beats. Love that. So Jim and Andy go to the high school, and at this season 3, Andy. I mean, I hate Andy in every season, but especially season 3, Andy was horrible, and he kept saying "beer me" about everything. And at one point, Jim says, "Lord, beer me strength." So they get to the high school, and Andy is talking about how he has this girlfriend, and it turns out the girlfriend is a high school student. um, here's the thing about that high school student who did look like she was like 16, but she's actually in real life older than she was in her 20s. She was in her late 20s at that time, and she was actually older than John Krasinski. I thought that was crazy. So so Michael has the press conference. He has a customer over, and the customer says, "No, I don't accept your apology. This is horrible. You should be fired." And Michael just goes crazy on her. It just uh, he called her an ungrateful biatch or something like that. He made this giant check for like free paper or something like that, and just like, you don't get this check anymore. And he just goes off on it, and the reporter's like, yeah, I caught all that. I also love this line from Dwight. He says, I grew up on a farm. Dwight says something like, by the way, not for nothing, but I think that the cartoon sex between the mouse and the duck was actually consensual. He says, I grew up on a farm. I've seen animals having sex in every position imaginable. Goat on chicken, chicken on goat, couple of chickens doing a goat, couple of pigs watching. Whoever did this got this exactly right. Oh my goodness. Number 51, season 3, episode 11, Back from Vacation. Michael isn't supposed to let anyone know that he and Jan went on vacation together in Jamaica, but he accidentally circulates a compromising photo of them to the office via email. So the cold open was Dwight brought a tape recorder to a meeting, and Jim is having a lot of fun with it, and everybody's having fun with it. It's like, oh, Dwight, why'd you take your pants off, and all this silly stuff, and everybody's going around. And then Andy's like, I just decapitated Phyllis or something like that. And that just took it too far. So Karen is living in a hotel, and she wanted to find an apartment near him, and Jim didn't want that. So Karen is really upset. Like, where is this relationship going? Pam talks to Jim and basically convinces him that it's okay if they live near each other. And she said she was happy to help them, but actually she's off in the stairwell, and she's just crying her eyes out. And Dwight goes to console her, which is really sweet, but he says he doesn't know what's going on. He just says, so you're PMSing pretty bad, huh? So that's kind of ruined it, but still very, very sweet. But the main thing of this episode was Michael sent he meant to send Packer pictures of him in Jamaica, and he accidentally sent them to packaging, which is basically the warehouse. So and apparently it spread instantly. Like they spread it throughout the entire company. I think Toby said something like 5 different people from outside the company sent me these pictures. It's a picture of basically Jan topless laying down, and Michael next to her. Jan comes in, and she said she was in Scottsdale, but then yeah, she said she was in Scottsdale. So I mean, basically, everybody knows she's lying. What the heck? We saw the pictures. Everybody saw the picture. But then she has a meeting with Michael and says she's attracted to him. So I guess the relationship continues. Number 50, season 3, episode 12, Traveling Salesman. Dwight does a favor for Angela to keep her from getting in trouble. Andy finds out and uses it against him to get in tighter with Michael. And what Dwight must fess up, which would reveal his relationship with Angela or risk getting fired. The cold open was Michael had he had one of those programs where you type in and the robot voice makes it says something. So he put some eyes and ears on the monitor and said, "This is Harvey. It's a computer." And he brings Jim in and says an appropriate things, and he brings Pam in, and it says, "Me so horny, we love you, Long Tim," and they're Jim and Pam are like, "Ooh, we love them. Who's Long Tim? We'd love to meet Long Tim." And Michael says, "Well, you ruined it." And at the end, he just smiles at the camera and says, "Boobs." I gotta admit that's funny. Okay, so Michael wanted to do this. I don't know if it's an amazing race thing, but he basically wanted this was Andy's idea for everybody to team up and go out on calls. And the teams were Jim and Dwight, Andy and Michael, Karen and Phyllis, and Stanley and Ryan. Stanley's original choice was pass. so um so Jim and Dwight are basically the two best salespeople. So it's no surprise that they would do best at this. Um, they basically they basically teamed up and they were a great team. They go to this customer and they basically say, if you use Staples or whoever else, you're going to be on hold forever. But if you use us, you can instantly get our customer service. And so Jim calls Jim calls Kelly and demonstrates. So look how quick we respond. And Kelly just starts to talk his ear off, and he hangs up on her. She's like, "Oh my god, Jim!" No, 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 no. Click. Um, Stanley and Ryan were so funny. Ryan said, "Hey, can I do this presentation?" And it's a company with like a bunch of I guess he was intimidated a bunch of large black guys. I don't know. He was intimidated by that, and he just kept saying hi, hi, and it just froze. And Stanley thought that was the funniest thing ever. Um, Karen and Phyllis had Karen do a makeover to look to like look really like a 60s haircut with this too much makeup and this poofy hair and stuff. And Karen's like, "What the heck's going on?" And then they go to the customer and they see that the customer's wife looks exactly like that. It's like, oh, okay. But then Phyllis is like, "Okay, well, you got to pay for that hair. You got to pay for this makeover." But while they're coming back, um, Phyllis says, you and Jim look really good together. Jim was hung up on Pam forever. And I think this is the first time that Karen learns that Jim had a thing for Pam. So that gets Jim in a lot of trouble with Karen. The main thing about this episode is Andy is just pure evil. He is just basically out to get Dwight, and he teams up with Michael, and Michael is the best at sales. He's just amazing, but Andy torpedoes him every time because he is as good as Michael is. Andy is just as bad, and he just torpedoes a sale. And Andy's like, why do we even want that customer? And Michael's like, yeah, we did. But he just keep digging it at Dwight and saying, why didn't Dwight try to get you fired earlier this year or something like that? And just keep reminding him how bad Dwight is. And Andy finds out that Dwight went to New York for Angela because of the tax forms had to go in or something like that. So he frames Dwight. He finds the turnpike tickets and stuff like that, and he shows this to Michael, and Michael says, you said one more time you lie to me, that's it, you're done. And Michael says, I want you to think long and hard. And Dwight says, that's what she said. And Michael says, don't you dare. But basically, if Dwight says, "Yeah, I went to New York," then A, he's lying, and B, he has to admit he had to admit he's in a relationship with Angela, and Angela doesn't want that. So, I mean, Angela's horrible in this situation too. Uh, Basically, all they have to do is announce they're a couple, and he's fine. But she didn't want that, so he had to quit basically for her. He fell on a sword for love. Um, so so he announces that he's leaving, and um, Jim and Karen have a talk, and Jim tells him, he's like, yeah, I did have a thing for Pam, but it's nothing now or whatever. And he comes back, and Dwight is leaving, and Jim's like, hey Dwight, what's going on? And Dwight just gives him a big hug. So that's sweet. As much as they hate each other, they actually do like each other, as we'll see in other seasons. Number 49, season 6, episode 21, Happy Hour. Oscar gets everybody in the office to go to happy hour so that he could hit on a coworker in shipping. Pam tries to set up Michael with a friend at the bar, but Michael's alter ego date Mike threatens to spoil the entire evening. Andy and Aaron try to keep their relationship under wraps. The cold open was cute. Michael did 25 push-ups and says whoever beats him can go home. And everybody tries, but Stanley, who loves getting out early, powers through to do the 25 push-ups. I think he only saved like an hour of work, but for Stanley, it's all worth it because all he wants every minute he's not there is a good time. So yeah, they go to basically Oscar arranges this happy hour, and they all go. It's the bar. It was basically just like Dave and Buster's, but they called it something else, like Jim and Webster's or something like that. And they're having a good time, and um Jim and Pam are there with her friend, and they invite Michael to play pool, and everything's going well. They're hitting it off. Everything's wonderful. And then Jim says, I think you two would be really good with each other. And Michael realizes, oh, this is a date. And he goes in the car and he gets his beret and he turns into Date Mike. Hi, I'm Date Mike. Nice to meet me. How do you like your eggs in the morning? And he turns into the most obnoxious person, even for Michael standards. He's obnoxious, and just completely torpedoes it with this girl. And Jim and Pam are just like just cannot believe how terrible this is. Eventually, he almost gets kicked out by the manager, whose name is Donna, and and I don't think he means to, but she's really into him. And so they eventually go out on a date, and that starts there was a whole arc with Michael and Donna, and how Donna's actually married, but she's cheating on her husband with Michael. Is it Pam's sister or friend Isabel comes to see Dwight because she has a thing for him because they met during Jim and Pam's wedding. And so she goes to hang out with Dwight, and they are getting along so well, and they do look physically, they look perfect for each other. But then Angela's there too, and Angela and Dwight just signed the baby making contract, and it's just so funny. It was so funny that I don't know how tall Rainn Wilson was, probably 6 foot tall or whatever, and this Isabel is basically as tall as he is, and then little Angela, who's like a foot shorter than them, just like tagging along, and it was just so funny. But in the parking lot, like Dwight is leaving with Isabel, and Angela says, "I am taking you to court. We have a contract," and Isabel's like, "Who are you?" And just bumps her in the head. The thing with Andy and Aaron, they were secretly dating. They didn't want anybody to know, and they spent the whole night like being away from each other because they didn't want to let it on that they were dating. and it just turned into a disaster. At one point they said, well, let's hang out, let's hit on other people and so to throw off the scent. And so Dwight's talking to this girl, and meanwhile Aaron is basically like feeling up this guy and he's like, what the hell are you doing? So eventually Andy realizes this is not how I want a relationship to go. So he gets on the loudspeaker, says, attention, everybody. Me and Aaron have been going out and it's been going pretty well. So there you go. Number 48, season 4, episode 4, Money. As Jan renovates the condo, Michael confronts his growing debts every way he can, which includes pressuring his employees for a loan. Pam and Jim spend a night out on Dwight's family beet farm, now a bed and breakfast. This was a 2-part episode. The cold open was Michael is being mean to Pam and basically treating her like the Meryl Streep character in Devil Wears Prada. And I think Pam said something like Michael has his Netflix tapes or DVDs sent to the office. Talk about an out of something that's not current anymore. But Michael says to her, he says, I owe you an apology. Turns out Meryl Streep was the villain. Who saw that coming? By the way, I never saw Devil Wears Prada. So, but then he says something about I'll always love you, Manushka, or something like that. And Pam's like, what the heck's he talking about? Like, oh, $1 million baby. Is Michael going to try to kill me or something like that? So Jan is living with Michael and they're renovating the condo and spending a ton of money. They traded in both of their cars for a Porsche, and Michael has no money because he wasn't making much at Dunder Mifflin as it was. And he goes to work. So he works at Dunder Mifflin until 5. Then from 8 to basically he goes from that job to another job as a telemarketer. And it's for this, sounds like a really shady diet pill. And he's just cold calling customers. And one of the customers he actually called was Stanley. And he recognizes Michael's voice. He's like, Michael, what are you doing? I refuse to talk to you outside of work hours. And he has this boss, like Michael's sales style is not good for telemarketing. Telemarketing, you just read your script, you go from one call to the other. Michael likes to build relationships, and the boss yells at him all the time. It's like, no, just get through the call, read the script, and go to the next one. So Michael's not doing well at the telemarketing job. Ryan comes to the office, and this is I see this meme all the time. He says, how's my favorite branch doing? And he tells Michael to use PowerPoint to do a PowerPoint presentation. And because Michael is probably for many reasons, but because one of them is probably because he's working at his telemarketing job, he needed time to do a PowerPoint. And as we see, he didn't even have time to open PowerPoint. And so Michael gets up in front of everybody. He says, let's talk about PowerPoint. PowerPoint. He's just pointing at people. Ryan says, you either have to quit this job or he's fired. He has to quit the telemarketing job or he's fired. He can't have both because it's clearly affecting his work. I did like that Michael, his presentation was basically him installing PowerPoint because he's never used it before. So Dwight just broke up with Angela, and he is really upset about it. And to cheer him up, Jim and Pam find out that Dwight has the bed and breakfast, and that he's on TripAdvisor. So they book time in the bed and breakfast. And Dwight is showing them around, and Dwight says, as of this morning, we are completely wireless here at Shoot Farms. But as soon as I find out where Moe's hid all the wires, we'll get the power back on. So Jim and Pam are at Shroot Farms, and it's just silliness. Um, at one point, they're all digging, they're all scooping up manure and putting it in wheelbarrows, and then Moses throwing the manure at Dwight. Um, uh, Jim says that Dwight has to tell him a bedtime story. So Dwight reads from a Harry Potter book. Um, and uh yeah, but the main part of this episode is Michael and his money problems. And Creed tells Michael, listen, you just go for do declare bankruptcy, and that's it. All your money problems are gone. And in a talking head, Creed says, Creed Bratton has never declared bankruptcy. When Creed Bratton goes in trouble, he transfers his debt to William Charles Schneider, which is actually Creed's real name. And I think that driver's license he had or whatever was his actual driver's license, which is with his actual date of birth and stuff. Of course. But the main thing and one of the best lines and one of the best scenes in all of the Office is when Michael just walks out of his office and he says, I declare bankruptcy. And then he goes inside. And Oscar says, hey, I just wanted you to know that you can't just say the word bankruptcy and expect anything to happen. And Michael says, I didn't say it, I declared it. I love it. Oscar is helping Michael with his expenses. Basically, Michael does not know. Michael probably has bought every single thing that was on those late night infomercials, like every single thing, even just the silliest stuff. He just doesn't know. And Oscar is telling him he needs to stop spending all that. And he goes to call Jan, and Jan is like, oh, I don't understand. How could you possibly be this irresponsible, Michael? Even though it's all Jan's fault, or most of Jan's fault. And Michael can't take it anymore. He runs out the office. He runs away, and he goes to jump on a train. so Jan has to come into the office, and she finds him, and he just wants to get on a train and go away. And she says, you know what, you were always there for me, so I'll be there for you, something like that. So also in this episode, Andy was telling Dwight and everybody that he wants to date Angela, and Angela, basically just to spite Dwight, just to stick it to him, says, yes, you may ask me for a date. And this is just heartbreaking for Dwight. And now Dwight, just a couple in season 3, Pam was in the stairwell crying, and Dwight consoled her, and now Dwight is in the stairwell. I guess you could call it crying. He was like wailing or something like that. And Jim goes to console him and says, you know why I left Scranton? It was because I had it bad for Pam and I couldn't have her, and it just killed me, and I couldn't be near her. So I get it, but I promised you it'll get better. And it was just really sweet moments. And then, then Dwight goes to hug him, but Jim is already gone. Number 47, season 3, episode 7, branch closing. After years of speculation, Jan announces the decision to close the Scranton branch. Dwight and Michael go to Michael's house to go to David Wallace's house to confront him, and Meredith tries to find out who she made her last day pact with, and everybody deals with the news differently. So the cold open was one of the best ones. This was future Dwight. So Jim is in the Stanford branch, and he says from time to time I send Dwight faxes from himself from the future. Dwight, at 8 a.m. today, someone poisons the coffee. Do not drink the coffee. More instructions will follow. Cordially, future Dwight. And Stanley is going to drink the coffee, and Dwight tackles him. He says, you'll thank me later. That is awesome. That's brilliant. But yeah, basically Jan comes in and says, we're closing the branch. We'll bring some people up to Stanford and some people will get severance packages. And Michael says, well, what am I? Am I a bring the Stanford person or a severance package person? And Jan says, you're a severance package person. And Michael just loses it and basically says, is this because I spurned you as a lover? Is this why? Um, which probably that might have something to do with it. Uh, Dwight says now Michael didn't tell everybody yet, but when he says Dwight says, when you become close with someone, you develop kind of a sixth sense. You could read their minds like a book. And right now, the title of Michael's book is Something Weird is Going On. What did Jan say? The Michael Scott story by Michael Scott with Dwight Schrute. This had also one of the famous lines. Michael says, all I could do right now is put on a brave face and go out there and be their leader. And then he just says, it's over. So yeah, so everybody finds out that the branch is going to close. Pam is happy. She could go to art school or do something. Ryan's happy because he could break up with Kelly, and Stanley's happy because he could retire. So there's three people that are very happy if the branch is closing. The Stanford branch finds out that that Scranton is closing, and they're happy. So Jan goes to talk to Josh and Jim, and basically says Jim will be second in charge. And Josh, Jim kept asking Josh how this is all going to work, and Josh basically said nothing. And the reason why Josh said nothing is because he was talking to Staples and trying to get a better job from them. So that's what Josh tells Jan. It's like, hey, I'm not taking the position. I'm taking a job with Staples. And Jan's like, the entire reason we chose Stanford is because of you, Josh. This is all going to be about you. And Jim says, say what you will about Michael Scott, but he would never do something like that, which is true. Michael and Dwight go to David Wallace's house, and they just wait for David Wallace, and they were going to confront him, but David Wallace never shows up. So they're there all day, and when Jan finds out that when Josh says he's taking the job with Staples, they have an emergency meeting, and they decide, okay, now it's Stanford that's closing and Scranton will stay in business. So that changes everything. And Pam goes to call Michael, but Michael never picks up. And at the end of the day, so Jan goes back to Scranton. So at this point, she went from New York to Scranton to tell Michael that the branch was closing. Then she goes from Scranton to the Connecticut to talk to Josh and Jim. Then she goes from Connecticut to New York to have that meeting. Then she goes from New York to Scranton. So she probably put like 1,000 miles on the car in one day. And she says, what's going on? Because nobody is even thinking about doing work. It's like, we know we're closing. And Jan says, actually, no, you're not closing. You're going to stay in business. It's Stanford that's closing. And some people will be coming from Stanford to Scranton. And the first thing Pam was like, Pam basically, telegraphs, like, basically she was like, is Jim coming? Is basically what she said. And Jim is deciding whether what to do, and the whole reason he left Scranton is because of Pam. He doesn't want to go back to Scranton, but he tells Karen, what are you doing? Why don't you just go to New York? And that really bums out Karen because she likes Jim. And eventually Jim says, you know what, I'm going to Scranton and you should too. It'll be good. It'll be fun. So, and then Karen admits, yeah, she has a thing for him. So eventually Dwight gets the message that the Scranton branch is staying open, and they're dancing, they're jumping up and down, they're celebrating. This is one of my favorite scenes in the entire series. Um, they're like, we did it, we did it. How did we do it? I don't know. I have no idea. Okay, let's go. And like Rainn Wilson just nailed that. Sometimes he's just amazing. Number 46, season 2, episode 11, Booze Cruise. Michael sets up a booze cruise for the gang on a cold January night in Lake Wallenpaupack and makes attendance mandatory. Jim brings Katie along as his date, but their relationship is starting to show some cracks. Michael meets his match in the boat's obnoxious captain, and Roy makes a surprise announcement. The cold open was one of those legendary ones. Jim put all of Dwight's things in the vending machine. So if Dwight wants all his things, he has to go. he has to pay for them. And the great thing about why Dwight is so amazing is because he's such a he just goes with it. He just follows the rules. He just, he wants his I think he wanted his phone or his pen or his or a stapler or something like that, and Jim gives him a bag of nickels. He just has to keep putting nickels in the vending machine. So yeah, they're on this booze cruise, and Jim and Pam are outside. It was basically Jim and Pam, Jim and Katie, and Pam and Roy were talking, and I don't know. It's just they did not get along very well. And Jim and Pam go outside and they kind of have a moment, but Jim can't say anything. And then Pam says, well, I'll just go inside. And it seemed like Jim was going to tell Pam that he has feelings for her. And Roy talks because he was talking to Captain Jack, and Roy says, you know what? I'm making a date right now, June 10th. And everybody's excited except for Jim. Jim is just really sad. And Katie said something like, do you think we'll ever be like that? And Jim said no. And Jim's like, we should break up. So that got really, really awkward. Yeah, Michael, the Captain Jack was basically the Michael Scott of the boat. He was just so obnoxious, and Michael tried to be the captain and in charge of everything, and the captain of the boat said, no, I'm in charge, and they just clashed the whole time, and Michael just got so angry. He was about to have a presentation, and he gets on the microphone and says, the boat is sinking. And his attention, everybody. The boat is sinking. We only have a few minutes before everybody dies. And some people actually jumped off the boats. Somebody jumps off the boat. And so Michael is tied to the railing for the rest of the voyage. Dwight is being really obnoxious, and the captain says, hey, how about you steer the ship? Here's how you steer it. And Dwight thinks that's actually how you steer the ship, and Michael says, it's a fake wheel, dummy. But one of the main scenes is when Michael is outside, Jim goes outside, and he just says, I'm really sad, and I have a thing for Pam. And Michael says, well, why don't you just go for it? And Jim says, well, because she's engaged. And Michael says, engaged doesn't mean married. Don't ever give up. And so that gives Jim a little pep talk. So that is it. That is 55 through 46. Only about 5 of these to go. So we're into the top 50. So thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. See you later.